This is Appalachia, and I was born here. When people think of Appalachia and our history, they usually think of the Scots and the Irish. But Appalachia is so much more than Scots-Irish history, as rich as that is. Appalachia is made up of many diverse groups of people that have been here for centuries. The peoples that make up this region and the history that it's comprised of are as diverse and rich and interesting as the landscape around us. During this documentary series, I hope to uncover hidden gems in the history of this region, beginning with this preliminary sketch on the history of the Melungeons. If you want to learn more about Appalachia, please click like and subscribe. That helps my channel to grow. Who were the Melungeons? Where did they come from and where did they go? Let's start in the 1500s. In 1566, a Spanish explorer named Juan Pardo was sent to fortify a fort in known Catawba lands. The fort was known as Saint Elena. The Spanish king at that time wanted the conquistadores to find a route to New Spain, that is now Mexico, an inland route actually. There were other forts scattered throughout the southeast at that time. Each one fell, and so did Saint Elena. In 1572, the Spaniards packed up and left, but prior to that, the Spaniards had demanded food of the Catawba without giving them anything in return. They had taken advantage of their neighbors and mistreated them. The men had even forced sexual relations with the women. The natives, along with the Spanish slaves of various nationalities, mounted a rebellion. To believe that there were no mixed children born during this time might be a little naive. When the Spaniards pulled out of Catawba country, there was a short-lived lull in European visits, and in the following years, the Catawba would have a couple of wars with the Tuscarora. They would also become a safe haven for the Wiriyamasi, Saponi, Tudelo, and other smaller tribes whose numbers had been ravaged by European diseases and by war. At this time, the natives had no immunity to these European diseases. I'll also speculate a little bit here, thinking of biology. It is, I think, reasonable to assume that children born of Spanish paternity may have had more of a natural immunity to European diseases, and they may have survived, and to this day that could account to why there is less DNA that shows up amongst that Native American DNA that shows up amongst Eastern tribes than, say, amongst some of the tribes that were encountered later on. The coming of the British was an absolute nightmare for the Catawba. Back in 1521, the Catawba and their affiliates claimed about 55,000 square miles as home. By 1670, the English showed up in droves. Every immigrant that came in took a piece of Catawba homeland. Some of them came for religious freedom. Some came to get rich. Some came as an alternative to prison. Some came because they were travelers or gypsies that had been expelled from England and Scotland. Some came to hunt and trade, and some came to escape being an indentured servant. They came from England and Holland and France and Germany and Wales and Switzerland and every nation that was loyal to the British crown. They came by the hundreds and they came by the thousands. Within 90 years of the arrival of the English in all those countries allied with the British crown, few Catawba or Catawba that was mixed with Saponi and Yamasee and Tutelo, and the remnants of other decimated tribes remained in their homelands. In 1790, a smallpox epidemic wiped out about half their numbers. By the following year, their capital had been given an English name, Pine Tree Hill. The Catawba agreed to move north to Waxhaw Old Fields, North Carolina. By the terms of the treaty they signed, they lost their lands in Virginia and most of the Carolinas. The Catawba moved into their assigned area, but the European settlers had already moved there and claimed the land. The governor of North Carolina refused to do anything about it because he personally had not signed anything. White hunters disregarded Catawba land rights, and they would literally steal the game right out of Catawba camps. In 1753, the Catawba leader, King Hagler, died, and from that point on, the English king completely disregarded the Catawba Treaty. Then another epidemic of smallpox broke out and took about half of the remaining Catawba, and this once huge nation of people was now a homeless handful of refugees. Then when the Revolutionary War broke out and settlers were killing their own kind, the Catawba were confused. In 1780, the English king took Charleston, and British troops came in and massacred colonial patriots at Waxhaw. The Catawba then feared for their own safety. They feared they were next, so they fled their homelands. They fled in the wake of approaching British troops. Some fled to the Monacan Nation. Some may have gone toward Roanoke and lived among the Pamunkey. Another group even went south and appealed to their longtime enemies, the Cherokee. And another group, appalled by the idea of joining forces with the Cherokee, was known as the Christian Catawba. The Christian Catawba moved northward, back toward the original towns of Joara, Saltville, and Cheska, which are located on the North Carolina-Virginia border area along New River. That's where Southwest Virginia meets Kentucky, meets Tennessee, meets North Carolina. And there was already living there a tribe with their own language, but pretty much nameless. Then there were other people living there, mountain people, people who had escaped, people who were free people of color, escaped indentured servants, many of whom may have been the escaped Romani travelers from Scotland and England. All of these people were running. They were running from bondage. They only wanted one thing, to live in freedom. In time, these people, along with the Catawba, Saponi, and Tutelo remnants, would become known as the Melungeons, bearing DNA from Africa, Europe, and Native America. As settlers continued to encroach upon their homelands, even in the mountains, these people pushed westward, northward, and southward. Some went into Kentucky along the Cumberland River shed, which isn't so far from the New River water basin, into Kentucky and into Tennessee, into Ohio, into West Virginia, and as far south as Louisiana. In the 1800s, some of these families left Kentucky and headed out for Texas. According to a 1990s program produced by the public broadcasting station, a very high concentration of Melungeon descendants now live in both Kentucky and Texas. And they're also found in Ohio, Louisiana, all throughout the Southeast, even as far away as Alaska. They have traversed the world. The Melungeons haven't gone away. We're still here.